Welcome to Ask a Property Manager, episode 111. Today we've got 5 tips on how to help you get your apartment ready for the next tenant. Stick around to the end for a bonus tip on how to help you protect your property. Stay tuned. So your tenants have just moved out and now it's time to get the unit ready for the next set of tenants. What are the steps that you need to take to get your place ready? Today we've got 5 tips or maybe even best practices on how to help you get your apartment ready for rent. We're going to start off with maintenance. It's definitely going to be maintenance time when you go to start getting your apartment ready for rent. Depending on the previous tenant, this may be the first time that you've been in the unit for some period of time. So you're going to want to make sure that you're spending the time to go through everything in the unit to make sure that it works the way that it's supposed to. Now is also a good time to decide on what work you want to do to get the unit ready and to execute on that work. Seems pretty straightforward. When you're deciding on your scope of work, you're always going to want to make sure that you're spending the time to go through the unit thoroughly because there's things that are always getting overlooked. Don't forget to do things like open and close all of the doors and all of the windows. Make sure they open, close, latch, and lock the way that they're supposed to. I can't tell you the number of times I've walked into an apartment and found windows that have broken locks or locks that just don't work, and it's a security issue. Opening and closing cabinets to make sure that they function the way that they're supposed to. Checking all of the functions on your appliances to make sure that they work the way they're supposed to. If you've got a fridge with an ice maker and a water dispenser, that's supposed to work when a new tenant moves in. Check your smoke and CO detectors to make sure that you're in compliance and make sure that they're working properly. Don't forget that smoke and CO detectors do have a lifespan on them. I believe it's 10 years on smoke detectors and I believe it's 5 years on CO detectors. But when you take the detector unit off the wall or off the ceiling, there will be a date on the back of it and it'll tell you that it's only good until that date. So make sure you're checking those when you're changing your batteries. Be sure to check those dates. Make sure that you're squaring yourself away there as well. Also, make sure you check all your drains to make sure that they're open and flowing the way that they're supposed to. We've had tenants that have left us with stopped up drains and we haven't realized it until the next tenant comes in and goes to use that sink. So make sure that you're checking all of your drains to make sure that water's flowing the way that it's supposed to. And don't forget to change your locks. Some states will actually make it a requirement that you need to change your locks. But realistically speaking, I see no justifiable reason not to change your locks between every set of tenants. You want to make sure that the tenant and you are the only people with active sets of keys to that unit. Changing the locks is what's going to ensure that. You don't want somebody from a previous tenancy coming back and coming into the unit unexpected because it's only going to create havoc for you. I guarantee you that. Now, that's all pretty straightforward and basic stuff that you should be looking at on every turnover. But what about other work that needs to be accomplished? Is it time to paint out the unit? Is it time to replace flooring? Do you need to repair any major fixtures or replace any major fixtures? Essentially, what I'm recommending here is for you to go through every room of your unit, start at one of the upper corners and work your way top to bottom, left to right on that wall. Then turn to the next wall and do the same thing, and the next wall and the next wall, and then do your floors and then do your ceilings. And when you go through this process, what you're doing is forcing yourself to look at and touch every single part of the room, every single part of the apartment to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to, or to check to see if it needs to be maintained. This also prevents you from missing things when you're only looking at one wall at a time, as opposed to looking at an entire room and trying to make notes on the entire room. My recommendation is to take pictures as you go through as well. Don't be afraid to take pictures of things as you're moving around the room so that you don't forget what you need to make notes on. And then don't forget to put those items in your scope of work. Typically what happens is I wind up with a set of photos. I also wind up with a bunch of notes, and then I take those two and combine them into ultimately what my scope of work is going to be for the turnover on that apartment. Going back to photos for a second, don't forget to grab photos of things like the model and serial number on appliances and like major mechanicals, furnaces, hot water tanks, things like that. Things that you may need to order parts for, essentially, is what I'm trying to drive home here. It's a lot easier to get a part for something if you already have the model and serial number than if you have to run and get that information before you can order the part. So when you're going through the unit, when you're squaring everything up, at the end of the tenancy and trying to decide on your scope of work, make sure that you're getting that stuff so that, hey, maybe you need to order a stove knob, and it's a lot easier to order that stove knob when you actually know what stove you need to order it for. So That would be my recommendation when you're talking about photos. Make sure that you're getting as many photos as you need to and take some detailed notes so that you can build out your scope of work. Essentially, the goal in completing this turnover maintenance is twofold. Number one, you want this place to be the best possible representation of both you and the property that it can be. Remember that when these tenants come in, this is the first time that they're going to have an opportunity to see this unit. You want to put both the property's best foot forward and your best foot forward. Number two, you also don't want to be back in this apartment 2 weeks down the road with a punch list of things that you forgot to do. Try to knock it all out on the front end so you don't have to go back in after the tenant moves in on the back end. I'm going to give you a little pro tip here. You're always going to wind up going back. I don't know as though we've ever had a single move-in where everything has gone 100% and there hasn't been some little thing that we have to go back and look at. You know, it just kind of happens. We make a call a couple weeks after tenants move in to see if there's any little maintenance stuff that's popped up. There's always something little. We just go and we knock that stuff out. But the goal is to have the smallest list possible, I guess, when you do go back to do those quick repairs. Number two, clean, clean, clean. First impressions mean a lot. We were just saying that you want to put your best foot and the property's best foot forward. And that means making sure that you have a clean apartment. What that's going to do is when it comes time to show, it's going to help attract quality tenants. If you think about it, if you walk into a dirty apartment or a dirty store or anything, don't you immediately start thinking about why isn't this place clean or why wasn't this apartment clean prior to it being shown? Like, your prospective tenants are thinking the exact same thing. They're interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them in a lot of instances, talking about whether or not they're interested in the unit and the quality of the unit and whether or not they think that you're going to be a good landlord, somebody that they can live with for probably the next 12 months at a minimum. So it does go both ways. And keeping the unit clean is going to get you a lot better class of tenant than if you are showing a dirty unit, because clean tenants are not going to look past a dirty unit and they're not going to move into a dirty unit. So after you've gone through and done all of your maintenance work, spend that extra time, really get the unit cleaned up. Windows, light fixtures, inside and outside of cabinets and appliances, tubs, toilets, everything. Make sure you're hitting everything. We like to call it hotel clean, which I guess is a bit of a misnomer, especially when you listen to some of these news stories about how some hotels are cleaned, but you obviously get the idea. A tenant should be bringing an apartment back to us, in theory, in broom clean condition. What we're supposed to be doing is getting that apartment back to what we call hotel clean condition before we turn it over to that next tenant. We're also taking move-in photos so that we know exactly how that apartment looked when the tenant moved in. And if they don't clean it to at least broom clean when they move out, they're going to get charged for that cleaning. We want to know exactly what it looked like on the front end so we know what it looks like, or so we can compare it to what it looks like on the back end. Keep in mind that during your cleaning, you may also need to have the unit fumigated. If you had previous tenants that had pets, or maybe they were complaining of a bed bug issue or something along those lines, now is the time to take care of fumigation, and now is also the time to take care of odor removal. Maybe the previous tenants had pets or something along those lines that need to be taken care of. Now is the time to be dealing with odor removal before you even show that unit. You don't want people walking into a unit that smells like old cooking smells or smoke or pet odor or whatever the case may be. Ultimately, you have to clean at the root cause of whatever it is. If you have pets that went all over the floor, you may have to replace some flooring. If you have heavy cooking smells, you may have to deep clean the appliances and you may have to repaint rooms and things of that nature. It really just depends on what the root source of the smell is, but that's what you have to tackle to actually get away from the smell. Deep cleaning sometimes works. Ozone machines sometimes works. We recommend those anytime you have like a smell, like a strong smoke or a cooking smell, that works well. Something along those lines would be your best bet for those sorts of situations. Don't forget to deodorize your unit. You don't want a stinky apartment when somebody comes in to look at it. It's that simple. It's that straightforward. And as I'd mentioned, typically speaking, paint's going to be one of your best friends when it comes to cleaning stuff like that up. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is get that apartment as clean as possible so that it presents as best as possible when you go to take your photos, which is point number 3. The more and better photos that you can take of your apartment, the more attractive your property is going to be when people start looking for the unit. At a minimum, you need to get at least one photo of each room. and the front exterior at a minimum. If you're able to get multiple photos of each room, that's even better. It's going to give people a better perspective of what the space looks like, and also make sure that you're grabbing photos of any unique features of your property. So if you're including a washer and dryer, if you have a big backyard or a garage or something that's included, make sure that you're including photos of all that stuff as well so that people have a good feel for what's included in the apartment. I also strongly recommend that you take a walkthrough video of the apartment. You don't have to talk during the video or anything like that. You can literally just walk around, show the unit, drop a music bed over it when you go to upload it to YouTube, and then people aren't listening to you talk. You don't have to worry about your voice or your footsteps being heard, whatever the case may be. And these don't have to be long videos. My typical apartment walkthrough is 1 to 2 minutes. It's very brief. It's a quick walkthrough of the apartment. We show them the most important stuff. I do voice narrate my videos, but it doesn't need to be a 5-minute explainer. 1 to 2 minutes, walk them through the place, make sure you highlight any important features and get them out of there. It's very straightforward. 1 to 2 minutes is all you need on something like that. Really, when it comes to a video tour, less is more. Show each room, highlight your key features, and wrap it up. Point number 4 is to write a good description for your rental. Make sure that you're including things such as what's included, any appliances that may be included, any utilities or lawn care, snow removal services that may be included, whether parking on street or off street is available, any special amenities should be highlighted in your listing description, anything extra that's included with rent, etc. Typically, I'll write more of a narrative style description, almost like a room by room, where I try to find 1 or 2 things per room to highlight. So for instance, if this kitchen has stainless steel appliances, I'm going to point out that there's a stainless steel set of appliances in the kitchen. Maybe if there's a ton of light that comes into the living room through a big bay window, that might be the feature that I highlight there. If there's a washer and dryer included in the property, I'm going to include that in my listing description because that's not necessarily the most common thing here in Western New York. Our listings also include the dimensions for all the rooms. It also includes a list of what our selection criteria are. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is give people as much information as I can on the front end so that they can get familiar with the property before they hit that I am interested button and ask us questions about the apartment. I'm not going to lie, I think in this day and age, the good description is probably a little bit less important than having good photos, having good video, and things of that nature, because people typically are finding their properties online. They're not necessarily looking at the written description. A lot of times, they're not even looking at all the photos. They're just flipping through and hitting the I'm interested button and trying to get themselves in line to see a place. But I always make sure that my descriptions contain as much information as possible because then I can reference people back to that if they have questions. One thing that I have had some luck with is putting some of the real highlights on images and including those as kind of part of the image set. So for instance, I may take a picture from the living room and overlay some text on that photo using an app. You can use an app like Canva or really any photo editing app on your phone or computer. Just take a photo of the living room and overlay some text including, off-street parking available. Don't forget, washer and dryer is included or this, that, and the other thing. Uploading that as part of the photo set as opposed to putting it in the written description sometimes will actually lead to things being seen more when people actually flip through those photo sets. So it's just one of the more creative ways to get your written description in front of somebody who's trying to look at something visually. Last but not least, step 5, list it, show it, and rent it. We typically will list our properties for rent on Zillow, Trulia, HotPads, and Facebook Marketplace. That generates more than enough leads for us to fill an apartment. Some of the other sources would be Craigslist, which tends to be a lot more scammy nowadays than not. There's also individual groups on Facebook, like for instance, here in Western New York, there's probably a dozen or more groups dedicated to people screwing around trying to find apartments. We don't list in the groups. We only go on Marketplace directly because the groups get so cumbersome. And don't forget, there's obviously the more traditional marketing styles, such as posting a for rent sign in the front yard, posting flyers around the neighborhood, maybe at grocery stores or convenience stores or whatever the case may be. Putting a newspaper ad in if you really like burning money. I don't really think newspaper ads are terribly effective. But I find that more and more often, at least here in our market, traditional marketing is not as efficient as digital marketing, online marketing. We're not having any problem filling our vacancies without going through the more traditional marketing methods such as newspapers and flyers and things like that. The digital costs us less to do, and it saves our clients money in the long run. So that's the reason that we go with predominantly digital marketing for our rentals. Your market may vary. If your property is tailored toward a senior living community, for instance, you may find that advertising online is not the best place to attract tenants. So, it really just boils down to what is the market for your property and in your area, and kind of figuring it out and going through the best place for you to market based on your property. As for showings, I typically recommend setting up a couple of open house times and having people register for an open house rather than scheduling individual showings. And the reason I say that is because if someone doesn't show up, hopefully you have more people coming through, so you're not just burning a bunch of time. I also recommend keeping it to a maximum of an hour and telling people that they can come anytime during that 1 hour window. I don't think that 2 hours is necessary in most instances, at least here in our market, but again, it may be in your market. That just seems to be one of those things that you'll have to figure out on your end when it comes to what makes sense for you. This seems to work well for us. If you're using paper applications, you should have them there to hand out. If you're using an online application, I would recommend having some way of giving people the link, whether it's written down on a piece of paper or a QR code or whatever the case may be. But have some way to get people the rental application so that they can move on to the next step of the process. And as for renting it, my strongest recommendation is to have a set of written tenant selection criteria that you've put in place prior to even putting this place on the market, and don't waver from those criteria. We've talked about that in other episodes. You can definitely go back and reference some of our other episodes where we talk about tenant selection criteria and things of that nature. I'm not going to beat on that horse here. I think it's already thoroughly dead. I've talked about it about 1 million times. But definitely look at a minimum, income, credit score, payment history, criminal history, rent payment history, landlord reference. If you can do eviction searches in your area, maybe include that as well. There's a lot of things that you can look at, but some states do restrict more than others. So make sure that you're paying attention to what you can and can't look at when you're doing your tenant screening. I strongly recommend having that criteria written down prior to listing the property and providing it to everybody who's interested in applying for the apartment. That way there's no questions on their end as to what you're looking for, and there's no question on your end as to what you're looking for. It makes it very, very easy for you to say, no, I'm sorry, you simply don't meet the criteria, and move on to the next candidate. In some states, it actually is a requirement to provide people with your written set of criteria. Some states it's not, but letting people know on the front end is generally just a good practice because it helps them sort of self-select out if they realize, okay, I'm not going to be able to qualify for this apartment after I've come and taken a look at it. But it does help you in the long run to make sure that you have good selection criteria because it's going to help you to get a better quality tenant in the long run. Last but not least, we've got our bonus tip, and this is on move-in inspections. Prior to the tenant moving into the unit, don't forget to complete a move-in inspection sheet going through everything in the unit and marking down what condition everything is in, any sort of damages, etc., etc. We also give our tenants a few days after they move in to let us know if they've discovered any additional damage or any issues that we didn't notice prior to them having moved into the apartment. And then we ask them to send us photos of whatever damages they uncovered. Obviously, we compare their photos to our photos to make sure that they didn't cause this damage. But then we just add it into their move-in inspection sheet if it was something that we missed, and it becomes part of their tenant record. Make sure you get the tenant to sign off on that move-in inspection so that everyone is in agreement and understands what the condition of that apartment is at the time of move-in. If you're interested in finding out more information on how to do one of these move-in inspections, head on over to the Rent Prep YouTube channel. If you go over to the Rent Prep YouTube page and search for move-in inspection, I did a 2 or 3 part series with the Rent Prep guys on how to do a move-in inspection and really kind of highlighted how to do the entire thing beginning to end. How to take that photo set, how to fill out that move-in inspection sheet, etc. It's very, very detailed and it's well worth the watch. I think you'll probably learn a lot from that video if that's something that you're looking for. Don't miss out on that. Thank you all so much for watching. I truly do appreciate it. If you learned something today, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have a friend or someone else that could benefit from this information, do me a favor and share it with them. Questions or comments, drop them below. We'll talk to you soon.